Hey, what's going on? So in today's video, I'm going to be testing out a whole bunch of different settings on my GoPro. This is a GoPro Hero 8 and I'm out snowboarding. It is March 17th. It's beautiful. It's like 46 degrees, I think. Spring day, the snow's melting. It's like partly cloudy, you know, it's not quite like a sunny, bright day or anything. And I've been curious what the best GoPro settings are, and I've done a lot of research on it, and it's, you get conflicting reviews and whatever, so conflicting advice, I should say. So I'm going to test out a whole bunch of different settings. So right now I am on Superview in 60 frames per second. I've got the GoPro color on. I've read you can go with the flat instead of GoPro color if you want to do your own color grading. I personally am I just would rather just use the GoPro. I know some people don't like the way the GoPro color looks, but I think it looks okay. So let me switch to the non-GoPro color right now and you can see what that looks like. Okay, so this is non-GoPro color, so no color. This is also on medium sharpness. So you can go high sharpness, medium, or low. All right, I'm back on the GoPro color. I also switched it to high sharpness. I also have the settings on medium bit rate as well as auto white balance, and the ISO set to a minimum of 100, maximum of 400. So it will automatically correct, you know, if the sun comes out, it'll probably drop down to 100, and then if you go over like 800, it starts to get really grainy, but you shouldn't have to be at 800 when it's this, you know, bright out. And there's so much white, the snow, it bounces, it reflects all that. So it probably only needs to be at 100, but I have it set at a max of 400. So I'm about to get off the lift here. We're gonna do some runs and see what this looks like going down the hill. I'm gonna keep the sharpness on high, the GoPro color on in Superview, and I'm going to have image stabilization on. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna extend this. I'm using the GoPro El Grande stick, and the sun just keeps kind of like poking in and out. So it's a little bright. We'll see how this goes. Okay, so for the next run, I just switched the sharpness from high down to medium. I also switched the Hypersmooth from the on position to off. So there's the only settings I'm going to change for right now. I don't want to change too much. So we'll see how this looks. Okay, so for the next one, I turned the sharpness down all the way to low, and I put the Hypersmooth on boost. Now, when you put the Hypersmooth on boost, it adds a ton of cropping, so I should look much smaller than I did the last time I was on the lift. When you put it on, it crops at 10%, and when it's on off, it doesn't crop it at all. So that's the downside to boost. The other downside to boost is sometimes I think it can look a little too smooth, like a little unnatural looking. So we're gonna see what this looks like in comparison. I turned the sharpness back up, so it was on low. I put it back on medium. I turned Hypersmooth back down to on, and then I also changed it from Superview down to widescreen. So it's going to crop it a little bit. It won't be as bubble shape looking probably. And I also changed it from 60 frames per second down to 30 frames per second. So we'll see if that makes a difference. I'm going to keep adjusting the frames per second so we can see. If you shoot in 60 frames per second, you can slow it down in post-production. So do, you know, like slow motion, and it won't look as choppy. So the lower frame rate will look more cinematic at full speed, but you can't slow it down as much in post. It'll just look too choppy.
Hey, if you're getting anything of value out of this right now, go down below, hit that thumbs up button, and subscribe to the channel. And when you do, make sure you ring that notification bell so you can be notified when I release new videos.
Okay, so for this one, I turned it down from 30 frames per second to 24 frames per second, and I changed it from widescreen to linear, so I probably got even smaller. This probably is not going to work very well as far as this goes because you won't be able to see too much, but it will get rid of the fisheye effect. So if you were filming somebody else, you could probably do this, but as far as filming yourself, this probably won't work. And again, now the 24 frames per second is supposed to be more cinematic looking than the 30 frames per second, so we'll see how that goes. All the other settings are still the same. I just switched the lens to narrow, so this is the tightest crop, and it doesn't give you the option for the Hypersmooth to be on anymore. It either gives you off or boost, and when you boost it, it wicked crops it. So I've got to imagine I'm like tiny right now, so I'm not even going to bother using this because I know for a fact this one won't look good going down the hill. Okay, so for this one I'm going to do 24 frames per second. The lens is back on Superview, and Hypersmooth is on, not boost, it's just on. This is kind of like what I did earlier. Instead of 60 frames per second, this is now 24 frames per second. So again, you won't be able to slow this down much if you wanted to do any slow-mo, but this, according to the gurus, is gonna have a more cinematic look. Okay, I jumped over the other side of the mountain. I'm on a different lift now. The only thing I changed here is I went from GoPro color to the flat color. So again, if you were going to use this one, you'd have to do some color correction in post. I personally don't want to deal with that, but I'm going to show you what it looks like going down the hill with flat, so you can see the snow and whatever the difference might be. Okay, so for this one, everything's the same. I just turned the sharpness onto high, so it's still 24 frames per second. GoPro color, or did I have the color off on the last one? I don't remember. GoPro color's on, Hypersmooth is on, and same of the other things. This is getting confusing for me too. Okay, so this one, I just turned the sharpness from high down to low, so it should make everything look a little smoother, less choppy. And I took the Hypersmooth off because I want to see what that looks like. Again, a lot of these are, you know, you're going to be able to see the difference between one thing and another, like Hypersmooth on or off. You'll be able to tell the sharpness, you'll be able to tell. So I'm not too concerned about testing every single scenario with each one, but I'm trying to get a mix so you can get an idea of what each thing does. Alright, so I just went back to the car and checked all the footage, and unfortunately the one before that last one, something on the camera switched and it just took a bunch of pictures. I don't know what I did. I hit a wrong button. But unfortunately there's a big cloud cover rolling in, like a big thick cloud. So the sun's gone, so it's going to change up the way everything looks. Now if you made it this far in the video, I'm going to do one more run. I'm going to turn it back to 30 frames per second. Superview is on, GoPro colors on, smooth is on, the sharpness is on low, and I bumped up the ISO to 800 because the clouds came over and it got a lot darker. So that should help make it a little brighter. Okay, for real. Now this is the last one. I just bumped it up to sharpness medium. I have a feeling this is going to be the one that I like the best.
Alright, now I'm going to show you some slow motion. I've got most of the settings the same on these, except the first one, the Hypersmooth, is off. Other than that, all the settings are the same. So I'll just show you a little clip of them slowed down, and I'll put on the screen what their speed is, so you can see side by side how it looks when you slow it down based on 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. Alright, so now it's time for my favorite settings. I alluded to most of this already throughout the video, but I like 1080p. I don't think it's worth going up to 4K or 2.7K. I've done videos recorded in that before, and I couldn't personally really notice the difference, and it's a humongous file size, so I don't think it's worth it. My favorite is the 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. I like them both pretty much equally. As I said, you're going to probably want to do 60 frames per second if you're slowing it down, especially based on that clip you just saw. I like Superview because it shows the most of you if you're using it on a stick, you know. If you're filming somebody else or they're filming you, you could get away with knocking that down to wide or linear because you can get farther away from them, and then you would lose that bubble, that fisheye effect. I like Hypersmooth on. I don't like it on boost. It looks too... it does weird stuff, and then when it's off, it's a little too choppy. The bitrate I did on standard. If you go up to high, then you have to do 2.7K or 4K, which as I already described, I'm not really into that. The shutter I just have on auto because honestly I don't know enough about the cameras to change it from auto and try to be super specific. The white balance I have on auto. I think it does a really good job of controlling that by itself. The ISO, as I said, I keep 100 to 400. You could do 100 to 800 as I did when it was cloudy. I don't think that it made a difference when I switched it to 800. If it's a super bright day, you could knock it down, but it's really good about figuring out what the right ISO is anyway. You know, you put the min and max in and it automatically detects where it needs to be. And on a day like this, when the clouds are coming in and out and I'm changing camera angles, the sun was behind me, so it was, you know, when I had the camera facing the sun, it was super bright and I was dark, but then when I spun the camera around and it was behind me facing forwards and the sun was behind me lighting me up, then it was like perfect. So it'll automatically adjust if you just put the min and the max in at 1 to 400. If it's darker, bump it up to 800. And again, if you go higher than 800, it starts to get very grainy. So you probably don't want to go higher than 800. For the sharpness, I liked medium. I thought when it was on low, everything was too smooth. You know, the trees were smooth and everything just had like a very smoothed out look. It looked a little fake. And then when it was on high, everything looked really rigid and hard, and I don't know, I didn't like it. Everything looked too fake. So I think right in the middle was perfect. For color, I like GoPro. I don't like the flat. I think it took a lot of the snow texture out and just made everything look flat. If you're really good with editing and dealing with the color and all that stuff afterwards, then you could do that. But I think the GoPro really adds a lot of saturation and pop to the film. I really like the way the sky looks with the GoPro. The snow looked pretty good. Like I was pretty pleased. Also, my snowboard's like bright orange, so with the GoPro, it popped. It looked really good, and then on flat, it just wasn't there. But again, if you know how to edit really well and change the colors and all that kind of stuff in post, feel free to shoot in flat. And then the last setting, I had the wind on auto. I mean, the wind sounds terrible. If you're gonna do these kinds of videos, I would recommend cutting out the sound if there's wind in it and adding in music instead, unless you're stationary filming somebody else and there's not a lot of wind. But even then you can have like crosswind and whatever, so you could turn the volume down and add some music on, you know. But as far as just like running with the wind, I don't think that's very good. All right, so there's my favorite GoPro settings for snowboarding or skiing. If you got anything out of this video, give it a thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I do lots of videos about leveling up your life, and I'm all over the place. So check out some of my other videos. Check out all my links in the description, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.